Right, we're just about to start. Nice to see you online. CR7 World, welcome. Nice to see you. Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. Great to see you guys online again. On today's show, Nikhil Gupta's sentencing for the plot to murder Jagtar Singh Johal has just been pushed back for a third time, now to the 25th of September. So we ask, what's really behind a delay that keeps growing against, of course, the backdrop of a US operation that Delhi is desperate to spin as vindication? And we have the latest from Jagtar Singh Johal's case as yet another hearing comes and goes in Delhi, with the prosecution still unable to produce its only witness, just 9.5 years into his detention. And Sikhs for Justice ramp up their campaign against the 15th of August, that so-called Independence Day of India, with fresh slogans appearing in the Delhi metro, a six-figure reward on the table, and a new attempt to tie it all to Washington's trade war with India. And then we're going to look at the quiet, unglamorous work of Sikh saver networks, helping flood-hit families in Assam and Punjab at the same time, and set it against the uncomfortable fact that the same consular infrastructure that Sikh charities rely on for community outreach is on the Indian state side being used for something rather different. And talking of so-called India's Independence Day coming up on the 15th, what better way to send a message than a quick reminder of the first fixture of Khalistan Football Association's first match against Ireland on the 15th of August. A great message to send back to India. Of course, all this and loads more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of great comments, so do stay tuned for that. Right. Okay. Great to see you guys online. Don't forget, if you please obviously feel free to comment on the live chat. If you have, and as I always like to send out the message now, if you have any specific questions you'd like to address to me in the chat, in the live chat, then just try and keep it very short, but put it in capitals so I can actually see it. And I will, of course, try as usual to dip into the live comments as we go through the show. But of course, I can only do that periodically when I get the opportunity to take my eyes off the camera and look at what you guys have been talking about. And of course, do keep it polite, keep the debates nice and sensible, please. Right, let's get on. And quite a bit to get through today. Nikhil Gupta. Yeah, this story runs and runs at the moment. So I want to start with an update on this case that we've been tracking since Nikhil Gupta himself was extradited from Prague back in 2024. Gosh, how time flies. It seems only yesterday we managed to extract him from Europe to bring him to the States. And it's all about, of course, that murder for hire plot targeting Jagtar Singh Johal, the Sikhs for Justice leader. And it was a plot designed to assassinate him, believe it or not, on American soil in New York. Well, Nikhil Gupta, he pleaded guilty back in February to conspiracy to commit murder for hire itself, and money laundering. So it's quite a pretty hefty raft of charges. And those charges were big enough. The combined statutory maximum of them could be 40 years, with federal guidelines actually pointing to somewhere between 19 and 24 years. So basically, he's going to spend a very, very long time in prison if he is indeed found guilty. Now, he was originally due to be sentenced on the 29th of May. Well, that date, unsurprisingly, came and went, and it was then pushed up to the 26th of June. Well, that date came and went too. And now, according to the US court filings, sentencing has now been deferred a third time to the 25th of September. So at least a month and a half away. And it means that by the time a judge finally passes sentence, when we get down that road, Gupta will have spent well over 3 years in American custody since that arrest at a Prague airport. Basically on a case where he changed his plea to guilty after maintaining for a long period that he'd been wrongly implicated. So officially, the reason given is procedural. Gupta brought in his new privately retained legal team over this summer, over the last couple of months. And it's been led by a New York firm that has a track record in exactly this kind of sentencing mitigation work. In other words, that they are experts. Essentially, I wouldn't quite say avoiding justice, but making sure that their clients have as an easy ride of it as possible through the legal system. And this team that is put together, they've asked for more time to prepare arguments for the lowest possible sentence within those federal guidelines. In other words, we want some more time just to make sure that we can ensure our client gets the absolute minimum sentence. So, well, on the face of it, at least, that is a pretty plausible explanation when you look at it on its own terms. And, I'm not going to tell you there's any sort of hidden conspiracy behind a fairly ordinary defence request. We're trying to join some dots here. But it is worth sitting with what this case actually represents while it does continue to be quietly kicked down that legal road. So prosecutors allege Gupta was recruited by Vikash Yadav. He's a named former officer of India's Foreign Intelligence Service. He wasn't former at the time. He just happened to retire since, surprisingly enough. So that Vikash Yadav, what was I saying? Oh, yes, he was the named former officer of India's RAW to arrange Panoon's assassination on the streets of Manhattan. So ultimately, it was Vikash Yadav who was instructing Nikhil Gupta. And of course, then the arguments run that Vikash Yadav was reporting into Ajit Doval, who in turn was obviously reporting into Narendra Modi. That whole sort of chain up to the very top tier of Indian government. Now, Vikash Yadav has never actually faced justice for this, and he remains, as far as we can determine, still in India, way beyond the reach of any American court, and it's very unlikely India's ever going to give him up. And as I say, he's never faced any justice for it, and it's unlikely he ever will. But while the prosecutors say he directed Nikhil Gupta on the ground, but Nikhil Gupta, of course, now remains in Brooklyn in New York State, waiting again for a sentencing date that does keep moving along. So there is a sort of question: is it justice delayed to be justice denied? But anyway, we'll see. But it does bring us to why this case it can't really be understood in isolation. Of course, it sits in a whole context of many things that are going on. And why we wanted to put it right alongside another story that I covered a couple of days ago, back on Monday, in fact. I told you about the sweeping US federal action against the Bishnoi crime network, that Operation Hardball, as it's officially called by the Department of Justice. And that operation saw Lawrence Bishnoi and his Lieutenant Satinderjit Singh Brar, Goldie Brar, charged over the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, amongst a whole other raft of very serious crime indictments. Now, Indian government officials and India's domestic press have spent the weeks since seizing on that operation as vindication. They've really spun this in their own inimitable way, as India does. Proof in their telling, the Godi media tells it, that the Khalistan movement itself is really just a front for organised crime and drug trafficking and extortion. In other words, they've managed to somehow spin this guilt towards the Khalistan movement, obviously away from the Indian government. And that Washington now, actually, as it turns out, according to India, agrees with Delhi's assessment of the threat. So what's interesting is to notice what that whole framing conveniently leaves out. And this is where you have to start looking at the whole discussions logically. The same US Department of Justice running Operation Hardball is the same department prosecuting Nikhil Gupta for a plot that prosecutors themselves say was directed by a serving Indian intelligence officer. So you can't credibly claim American vindication on one case, as in America says we didn't do it in one case, but ignoring what the same American courts are simultaneously alleging in the other case. You put both stories together and not, separately, and what actually emerges isn't Khalistan equals gangsterism. It's a US justice system pursuing violent criminal networks wherever it finds them, including, uncomfortably for Delhi, inside its own state apparatus. But that's the context worth keeping in view every time this case comes up, because every time they postpone it, you've got to remind yourself just what actually is going on, underneath the surface of all this. So whether Vikash Yadav ever does see the inside of an American courtroom is a very different question. And it's one that Delhi has far less interest in anyone asking. And I can tell you now, there's absolutely no chance that Vikash Yadav will ever be extradited to the United States. I hope I'm proved wrong in that, but hold me to those words, because I think it's most unlikely. Just dipping into the live comments there. Hello, Avatar Dylan and Manveer Singh. Who else is there? Murgi Vlog Shrink Who's there? Long live Khalistan. Nice to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. So anyway, back to the story. So it is also worth being precise about the scale of what Operation Hardball actually was, because the Indian government's framing of it depends on assuming nobody's going to look too closely at what India is saying about it. Operation Hardball wasn't a narrow single target operation. It involved more than 50 raids right across the US, Canada, Europe, right across the Western world, roughly 24 arrests and 37 defendants charged across 3 separate federal indictments, targeting 3 distinct India-based organized crime networks that were then accused of racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking, and contract killings across the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and indeed Portugal. It was massive. But Indian officials have been very quick to characterize this as validation of Delhi's long-standing warnings about a gangster Khalistan nexus, which is mad. And even with one intelligence official going so far as to call it a major success for Indian agencies. So you can see how India has seized on this and come up with a completely different interpretation of it. It's all about Khalistani gangsters. I mean, I love joining the dots, but that is a huge difference of dots to try and join. But India have done it. So what that framing never quite gets around to mentioning, though, is that the same indictment naming Bishnoi and Brar over Najjar's killing explicitly does not allege any Indian government role in that assassination. So they said, look, no, you've not made it. Yeah, we're cleared under the Najjar killing. But the Gupta case that runs in a very different courtroom at the same time alleges exactly that against a named former Indian intelligence officer. So Delhi wants credit for one prosecution. In other words, look, that proves it's all Khalistanis, nothing to do with us. But in the other, it wasn't us, but actually the US government are actually saying it is linked to the Indian state. So it doesn't take a genius to work out what's going on here and who the guilty party is. As I say, India can spin these truth and the facts as all they want, but the reality, uncomfortably for India, is spinning and spiraling all the way back to Delhi. And there's nothing they can do about it. They can spin all they want. So, and talking about Delhi and Indian injustice, let's sadly, another update on the Jaggi case. Oh, and I every time I talk about Jaggi, I sigh. I sigh in sort of sadness, desperation, and because it's just so frustrating. Imagine what it's like for the poor family. Anyway, let's jump across to an Indian courtroom and Jaggi. Of course, this has been going on for so many years now. November 2017, he was arbitrarily detained. It turns out he appeared again via video link on Tuesday. Yesterday, that was. Yeah, so he appeared in court via video link yesterday, once again, for what was actually billed as an administrative hearing. Now, nearly 6 weeks have passed since the last hearing. That was on the 23rd of June. And by any honest reading, absolutely nothing has happened since that last hearing on the 23rd of June. The prosecution has still not called the single alleged witness against him, despite telling the Supreme Court in India and the trial court repeatedly that it intended to. So where was the witness? He was supposed to give evidence before the 15th of July. On the 15th of July itself, last month, prosecutors then told the Supreme Court they couldn't proceed because a mandatory 10-week process for calling the witness hadn't been completed. But this was after months of assurances that the process was already underway. So what is it? What is the truth? So anyway, there is new context in all this. In response to years of exactly this kind of nonsense, this kind of outrageous flouting of international law or any expected democratic rule of law, something has changed in India. So in response to this delay, and India is notorious for its delayed and glacial pace of justice, and particularly these UAPA cases, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, these people like Jaggi who've been arrested and detained indefinitely under the UAPA. Special NIA courts have now been set up to now apparently fast-track long-pending trials. So apparently from the 4th of August, yesterday, that's the same day as Jaggi's hearing, these courts are now meant to begin conducting day-to-day proceedings to actually try to bring cases to a conclusion. So on paper, fantastic. It's a welcome reform. You know, I mean, great. I was going to salute any legal progress in India. But if you look at it in reality, it's 9.5 years too late. It's 9.5 years after Jaggi's arrest. And even now, nobody connected to this case can even tell you how or when it will actually move forward under this new framework. So a reform that shows up pretty much a decade late doesn't undo a decade that Jaggi has spent in prison. And here's actually what that decade has produced in the prosecution's own performance. 10 years in detention, no evidence has ever been produced against Jaggi in open court. He's already been acquitted of all charges in one of the cases brought against him. One of the 2 alleged witnesses in the remaining case has died. The other, and described by prosecutors as a foreign witness, still has not testified. And in the process required before they can is apparently still not complete. 9.5 years, and the state's entire case still rests on testimony from one witness it has still not managed to produce. I'll use my favorite phrase. It stinks. We know why. This isn't even Indian bureaucracy moving at glacial pace. This is deliberate. This is the message that India is trying to send to anybody who dares hold the Indian government to account. You cross us, you criticize us, you dare lift up the layers and expose the dirty underneath of India's dirty underbelly and all the illegal activities that we've been up to, you will pay the price. Just ask Jaswant Singh Kalra if you could. And unfortunately, Jaggi has fallen foul of that. So this is what is happening. So we'll see if there's going to be any progress with this new reform, or is it just, as we call, window dressing? And then, of course, hooray, I love any excuse to show this photo. Ed Miliband, Great Britain's latest foreign secretary. Again, another sigh. Whenever I talk about the British government, I have to align it with a sigh, a sign of, again, desperation and rolled eyes and resignation. Anyway, successive UK prime ministers, one after another, have failed to bring this to a resolution. The buck stops with the British government, not just the Indian government. And Avatar, net zero freak. I'm chuckling because for those of you outside the UK, Ed Miliband, I have to say he is one of the most frightening individuals who's ever served in the British government. Frightening in a very negative sense. He's not just incompetent, he's a zealous incompetent. That means he is absolutely blinkered with a whole ammunition of incompetence. This guy is called a net zero zealot. He's a net zero freak, as you say, Avatar. This guy was in charge of our environmental policy. He single-handedly has actually almost destroyed British industry in 2 years, because here in the UK, I'm going off on a slight tangent, do stop me. In 2 years, the UK now, thanks to this guy, has the most expensive industrial energy in the world. That is why British industry is dying on its feet, because our industries cannot afford to run anymore, because thanks to this guy and his nonsense policies, completely destroyed British industry, because electricity prices now are so expensive thanks to the green taxes and the policies he's brought in that is destroying and killing our economy. Anyway, that's a side issue. Sorry, but thank you, Avatar, for that. You got me on one of my favorite rants. But anyway, let's get back to Jaggi. So yeah, but it is relevant because this guy now, this is our new foreign secretary. This guy represents the United Kingdom on the global stage. This guy, who unfortunately for him was photographed eating a bacon sandwich in the most appalling manner, is now our chief diplomat. This guy who called Donald Trump a racist, misogynist, thick something or other, has now, I think, is it today or tomorrow, flies out to America to shake hands with the American administration, who in past years, he's called them every name under the sun. And yet now he's the United Kingdom's most senior diplomat. And this guy now is in charge of Jaggie's case, Mr. Incompetent himself. It is absolutely terrifying. What must the family of Jaggi think? What must Gurpreet, his brother, be thinking now? Gurpreet has had to deal with, is it 8 foreign secretaries in the last 9 years? Anyway, it's a whole run. I think there's 8 or 9 foreign secretaries who've taken over this case, and not one of them has delivered. But anyway, as I say, it's not just Ed Miliband, it's all his predecessors, but it's also Starmer and Johnson before him, our successive prime ministers, and David Cameron, our successive prime ministers who've just bowed on one knee to India, who've said all the right things, but have delivered absolutely nothing in terms of justice for Jagtar Singh Johal. In other words, every time Jaggie's MP, Member of Parliament in the UK, stands up and asks the government publicly, what are you doing about Jagtar Singh Johal, my constituent? The spokesperson stands up, just delivers some anodyne nonsense. We're raising it at every opportunity. Every time they say, we are raising Jaggie's case directly with his Indian counterpart. But what that translates to in UK government action is nothing. Nothing ever actually happens. So anyway, back to Jaggie's case. The next hearing is set for the 21st of August, when the prosecution says it expects to call further witnesses. Well, we've been here before. They've said that countless times before. So Jaggi and his family are still waiting 9.5 years later for anything resembling any sort of level of justice. And we'll be here again on the 21st, God willing, to tell you whether that time will be any different. Sadly, I hate to predict, but I think we all know what the situation is going to be. But let's hope we're proved wrong. And it is worth remembering what actually started all of this, because 9.5 years of procedural grind has actually a way of almost forgetting the original outrage, why Jaggi is actually in prison. He was a Scottish Sikh from Dumbarton, just outside Glasgow. He was seized off the street in Punjab in November 2017, just after his wedding. He'd popped out to buy some cigarettes, and he was bundled into the back of a van, and he was then tortured. I mean, again, I just shake my head in absolute disgust. And a raft of UK parliamentarians and expert legal charities agree that it is arbitrary detention. There has been no due legal process that any of us in any democracy would recognise. The UK government, 2 prime ministers, I think it's 4, was it 4, maybe even 4 or 5 foreign secretaries. Anyway, but loads of foreign secretaries, as it turns out, have never actually, once they took power, have never actually agreed it was arbitrary detention. They all said it in opposition, but as soon as they came to power, they changed their tune. Why? We know why. Because as soon as they take power, the deep state of Britain is deeply aligned with the deep state of India, and the deep state of India just gives a nod, saying, just tell your new prime minister what's what, will you? And lo and behold, suddenly it's all sort of words, but no actions, no delivery. Favorite phrase again, I have to say it stinks. Anyway, as you rightly say, Avtar, Modi is running India like the mafia. It's shocking. Anyway, right. One of my favorite characters, I always love talking about Gurpreet Singh Pannu. And this is actually quite an interesting one. Hi, stay safe. Nice to see you online too. Gurpreet Singh Pannu, like he does on almost daily basis, has gone onto his channel and he's launched videos and all the usual sensationalist sort of rhetoric. But it's quite interesting, this one, because of course we've got to look at it in the context of what's happening in 10 days' time, 15th of August, a very key date, because of course that is India Independence Day. So of course Gupta and the Sikhs for Justice are deliberately designing all their activity and their propaganda around the 15th of August. So his latest one, let me play you. I'll play this in the background. Here we go. So you can have a chuckle as Gupta gives it big licks, as we call it. Anyway, so what he's done, he's posted this fresh footage, but it's interesting because Khalistan slogans are now appearing apparently across Delhi metro stations. And it's framed this time around a specific and deliberate provocative warning. I mean, every warning he gives is always provocative. But what he's saying is this could mark, in their words, Narendra Modi's political death. Obviously timed to land ahead of that 15th of August date. So it is a tactic with a long history. And Sikhs for Justice and all their activists were actually behind a very similar metro graffiti campaign going back to 2023. And Delhi police actually arrested several people over that before. But what's different this time is the layering of it. So alongside the slogans, Jagtar Singh Johal has announced what he's calling an August the 15th directive. This is a $111,000 reward tied to stopping Modi's Independence Day address. And this echoes a similar reward offer that he made back in 2025, it was a couple of years ago, around Modi hoisting the tricolour at the Red Fort, hoisting the Indian flag up at the Red Fort. And he did actually offer a reward for anybody who could stop Modi raising the tricolour on the Red Fort, again on Independence Day. But in the same breath, he's now trying to tie the campaign to something entirely separate this time. The Trump administration's tariff measures against India, which of course are hugely onerous, the Trump administration's tariffs against India, the framing the two as complementary fronts in what Panoon is calling a campaign to kill India economically. So he's changed tack slightly. I'm going to read this in a certain way. Sikhs for Justice does have a long documented pattern of making these sort of maximalist, sensationalist, headline-grabbing announcements around symbolic dates, particularly. Obviously, things like referendum declarations. They always include a reward, promises to disrupt state events. But then actually a much thinner record of any of it actually materialising into any sort of major disruption on the ground. I mean, bless them. Loads of Khalistanis do get out there, but certainly not to the extent that I think Mr. Panoon would actually prefer. And Delhi police and India's NIA, the National Investigation Agency, they sort of tend to treat these statements as serious enough to file cases and issue arrests over. And don't forget, Sikhs for Justice are still designated in India as a terrorist organisation. I think that was it 2 years ago? It was renewed for another 5 years. So basically every 5 years, the Indian Supreme Court just basically rubber stamps Sikhs for Justice are a terrorist organisation, which, you know, I think Jagtar Singh Johal probably sort of puts that on his wall as a badge of pride more than anything else. But anyway, so ultimately, though, those threats from Delhi shouldn't be dismissed outright. But there is a difference between a genuine security concern and a rhetorical campaign, that the sorts of campaigns he does, designed quite deliberately to dominate headlines in the run-up to the 15th. But what makes this particular one worth watching a little bit more closely it's not his rhetoric on its own. It's the fact that it's now landing directly alongside the CJP protest movement. And that itself has been the subject of all sorts of pressure this summer. And Sikhs for Justice's own separate pledge, don't forget, they offered $1 million to the CJP movement if they refused to negotiate with the government and continued through to the 15th of August. So, you start to see he's jumped on the back of the CJP protest, realizing that, as I've said myself, is that movement has the real potential to cause huge disruptions in India overall. And of course, you carry that forward up to the 15th of August, you imagine the impact that's going to have not just domestically, but of course, globally. Because of course, globally, Modi loves it on Independence Day because the world's cameras look at all the celebrations of independence. So anyway, but ultimately, whatever anyone does make of Sikhs for Justice as an organisation, but I see you online. I know your feelings about Sikhs for Justice. We know that you've made that very clear. But whatever anybody thinks of Sikhs for Justice, that convergence, you've got this overseas group with a long history of this sort of maximalist rhetoric, now attaching itself financially and rhetorically to a genuine domestic youth protest movement, the CJP, it's exactly the kind of thing that India's government will then try to use to delegitimize the CJP protest by association. So they will say, look, you CJP protesters, because you're part of Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon's organization, you must be terrorists as well. So you start to see the dangerous alignment there. Now, it works for Gurpatwant, but of course, CJP are starting to think, actually, maybe this isn't the sort of alliance we want, because in India, Pannoon and Sikhs for Justice are designated as an official terrorist organization. So you start to sort of understand the dynamics of what's going on. It's a tricky one, really. But nice to see you online. Abella, nice to see you. I'm not even Indian. Oh, what are you, Abella? I'd be interested to know what nationality you are. It's always lovely to know where you guys come from and what your associations are, particularly those of you who have counter-narrative. If you disagree with certainly what I'm saying, but certainly let's just say the campaigns that we push on the show, let us know. But do it politely, but let us know why you disagree with this. It's always interesting to hear the other side of the discussion. Anyway, so, but as I say, there's a bigger picture going on in all this that does go back further than this particular campaign. Now, there we go. Sikhs for Justice activists were actually behind that Delhi Metro graffiti that I talked about in the run-up to the 2023 G20 summit. And as per this, two people actually were arrested and charged over that. And Pannoon himself has a documented history of announcing all sorts of these large cash rewards timed to Independence Day specifically, because it's an obvious one. But a similar offer worth roughly 11 crore rupees, that's an awful lot, was made from a press event in Lahore back in 2023, tied to stopping Modi from hoisting that tricolour that year too. So it's a bit of a regular occurrence. You know, Gupta sort of trots out these big offers of rewards when every time it comes around to Independence Day. He's desperate, essentially, to try and disrupt that sort of globally broadcast event. Now, none of these past campaigns have actually, sadly for Gurpatwant, materially disrupted the Red Fort event. And it's likely this one is probably going to be no different. Thank you, Singh. I love your podcast. Well, I love your comments. Much appreciated. But what does make this year actually a little bit more interesting and worth watching? Partly it's the Metro graffiti reappearing again, because actually that in itself is there it is. There it is. Yeah. Just popped up on screen then, just as I talked. That is actually quite significant because it's very reminiscent of any authoritarian government that if you dare take to the streets to protest because you'll get arrested, then the dissent then starts to manifest itself in things like that. So again, that in itself, in and of itself, is actually very symptomatic of an authoritarian regime. But also, as I say, it's not just the Metro graffiti, but all this is important because it's the timing against the live homegrown protest movement, the CJP, that the Indian government is already struggling to manage, certainly without any help from Washington-based diaspora groups at all. So it's very easy to dismiss Pannoon and his rhetoric, as many of you do. And I understand why you do. And I've explained in the past why actually don't be dismissive of it, because it actually does serve a purpose in its own right. But anyway, as I say, it's going to be interesting because the 15th of August is obviously this very significant date. And every year, the Sikh community around the world, particularly in the diaspora, obviously, less so in Punjab because they daren't, but certainly in the diaspora, the 15th of August is always marked as a black day for Sikhs globally. So unsurprisingly. So anything, frankly, that helps disrupt that and highlights the cause of the Sikh community globally is to be supported, whether or not you support Pannoon or not. Anyway, let's zip across to a nice story. That's not nice. There's awful flooding happening in Assam. Terrible floods, but what's happened afterwards is the nice bit. I'll come on to that. I thought the CJP protest was over. It is, technically, Abella. It is. They're not in the streets anymore, but the underlying issues have actually not gone away. And if you watched, was it 2 days show ago? I did actually discuss this whole point, saying, although it's over, the underlying tensions have not gone away. It will only take a spark to reignite it. That's why it is still very much an unresolved, bubbling cauldron. So I think what Modi is trying to do is not turn the heat up on that cauldron, let it boil over again. So we'll see. Anyway, yeah, let's jump to Assam. And again, it's an awful situation that's been happening in Assam. And sorry, I'm just looking at Hobe's, your comment. The underlying issue is unemployment. Yeah, I did address that the other day. And I think you're right. Although on the face of it, it was about the leaks of exam papers, and of course, many who committed suicide tragically. But ultimately, one of the root causes, if you drill all the way back to the root cause, why are so many people on the streets out there? It's the Indian economy, which is smoke and mirrors. The Indian economy is in trouble and has been for several years. And of course, when you get unemployment, particularly amongst the young, they take to the streets. Anyway, thank you for that, Hober. So yeah, back to Assam. Again, I will get through this story now. I'm delighted to say that despite these tragic pictures that we see coming out of Assam and the flooding that's really damaged so many large parts of Assam, it is the Sikh community that steps up. As always, it does what it always does best. So I'm going to show you a little bit of video. I've got a little bit of video footage, which you can see. It's the Midland Langar Saver Society, and this is a UK-based Sikh charity, amongst many, I have to say. Whoops, so you can see me. Yeah, there are, of course, many Sikh organisations are there, but this is one of several, and this is their video, actually. They just posted it up on social media. The Midland Langar Saver Society, it is a UK-based charity, and it's currently running relief operations in 2 Indian regions, roughly 2,500 kilometres apart at the same time. And in Assam, hundreds of thousands of people remain displaced by these awful, devastating floods. And this organisation, the Midland Langar Saver, and their volunteers, are there on the ground providing relief materials and essential supplies, as they always do. So well done to them. But at the same time, the same organisation continues supporting families in Punjab, over on the other side of India, still dealing with the consequences of last year's terrible floods. Again, I reported on that before. It's the Himalayas. If you live in the foothills and the downflow of the Himalayas, these floods are absolutely shocking. And well, it's a whole other story which we don't have time to go into, which is the mismanagement by India, the Indian government, and arguably the deliberate mismanagement of the water that is causing many of these floods. But anyway, that's another story. But anyway, back to the nice part of this story, as I say. And these organizations are there. Wherever the floods are, they are there. And through their wider global saver network, they're also running weekly Langar. That's obviously the free communal kitchen service for thousands of people here in the UK as well. Week in, week out, no fanfare attached to any of it. And this is just one of several organizations who do this from all around the world, US-based, UK-based, Australia-based. This is what Sikhs do, and they do it the best. And they don't do it with the fanfare, frankly, that they deserve. But ultimately, any fanfare that does come, it doesn't usually come from the mainstream, tragically, but it does come certainly from within the community. And the Global Sikh Team, apparently another organisation, they've also reached Assam with relief materials, supplies, etc., and guided, as they actually said in their own words, by the values of savour and compassion, offering prayers for the safety and recovery of everyone affected. So again, you can start to see the basic tenets of Sikhi infusing every action, every act of savour. 2 separate Sikh organisations working in parallel, amongst others on the ground, and covering ground that spans 2 of India's most flood-battered regions. But they are there, as always, as they always are, wherever there is a natural disaster. Some of the first agencies that go in are Sikh agencies. We've all heard, certainly in the West, we've heard of the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, Save the Children, all these huge multi-million-dollar global organizations. They get all the publicity. Oh, look what good work the Red Cross are doing. Yeah, but look what actual on-the-ground work these guys do. And the real difference, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole in this, but the real difference is how much are the CEOs and the senior management of organizations like the Red Cross earning. And then you look at organizations like this, just a simple, small charity from the Midlands here in the UK, or those ones from in the US. How much do those CEOs earn? Do they even have CEOs? They've just probably got a small committee where every penny that comes in is channeled into helping those who actually need it. It's a real scandal about global charities. And I have to say, the only charities I actually genuinely would trust, other than just local ones, in our own towns, any global charities that I would only ever trust would be Sikh charities, because I know that they are driven by entirely different motivations. They are driven by Sikhi and Seva. They're not driven by the huge industrial-sized corporate philosophies of the Red Cross and ones like that. Really, really scandalous, I have to say. But anyway, that's another issue. Kanwar Sidhu, long live Khalistan. I'm just going to increase the size of that because my glasses are getting worse. I'm really struggling to see many of these. Sorry, my mouse is frozen. So I just need to just zoom this so I can actually read your comments a little bit easier. Yes, Kanwar Sidhu, thank you. That long live Khalistan. Khalistan Zindabad, indeed. But anyway, just back to the news. And I want to pair what we've just talked about with this. Because it does pair naturally, or if not uncomfortably, with something that I raise quite regularly. And it deserves talking about once again, particularly as we come up to the 15th of August. It is now widely recognised, including by Canadian authorities officially in their own public statements, that Indian intelligence, in service of obviously the RSS and the Hindutva, has used the consular infrastructure abroad to manage and in the most serious cases, launch all their transnational repression operations, their murderous campaigns from their consular infrastructure against Sikhs and Khalistanis. So I want to put those side by side deliberately, because I want to just now look at the logic of these two stories. You've got the story of the Seva charity thing and the story of the consular Indian state. So on one side, you've got Sikh community infrastructure built entirely from voluntary Seva, the Langar kitchens, the diaspora fundraising, all that, reaching thousands of miles into India itself to help these people who've suffered terribly in these awful floods. Basically, just ordinary people helping fellow citizens in need, regardless of religion or politics. But on the other, you've got the actual state infrastructure, the consulates, the diplomatic missions, the machinery that is supposedly put in place specifically to represent and protect its country's citizens, both domestically and abroad. But instead, what is it doing? While Sikhs are out there actually doing the job of helping people all around the world, particularly diaspora people, the state machinery has been totally repurposed, even acknowledged by the Canadian government, repurposed to intimidate and surveil that same diaspora community, the community that's helping these poor people. So you start to see the logic. So one of these networks is helping people it owes nothing to, and the other is targeting people it's supposed to represent. So you start to see the logic of all this. Again, when you put these things sort of side by side, you start to see the complete paradox of the Indian nation. And it's, as always, it's down to the Sikh community just to get on with the normal humanity that we all need to practice. And the Indian state, meanwhile, just all it cares about is power, money, control. And anybody who stands in its way, of course, Sikhs and Khalistanis, are there to be then destroyed. That is what motivates these people. Independence Day of India with all these gloriously pretty posters. But look at the reality of who's doing what. Sikhs helping those, the Indian government killing. So it's all very nice celebrating the Sikhs. You can work out the logic for that yourself. And of course, it rarely makes the mainstream news, this whole sort of story, particularly the Seva networks, the people helping those who are struggling. Because these Sikhs who go out and help the world's vulnerable, they never check the religion of who they're feeding. They don't check the politics of who they're rescuing. And Assam is a majority Hindu, majority Assamese state with no historical connection to Punjab, or indeed any sort of sympathy, or at least publicly offered sympathy to Sikh grievances. And yet the Midland Langar Seva Society and the Global Sikh team and others went anyway, because that's what the principle of Saver actually demands. Service without condition, offered before it's asked for. And it's worth Indian officials sitting with that comparison the next time they reach for that language about Sikh organisations abroad being defined primarily by extremism or terrorism. Are those terrorists in this video? Again, make up your own mind. Anyway, to wrap up the news stories for today, it's just a quick reminder. I'm sorry, I have to do another reminder because I love this story. It is, and it's the date that matters. The theme of today's show has been the date, the 15th of August. The 15th of August, of course, is Independence Day of India. But notably, and I have no doubt deliberately so, it is the date that a Sikh football side, a Khalistan football side, takes to the pitch here in the UK, in Willenhall, English Midlands, under, of course, that banner of the Khalistan Football Association. And it is billed as the first ever sanctioned fixture of its kind. And the opponents, Kuman Saker Gaelgi, which I have no doubt I've totally mispronounced, Ireland anyway, but they're a fellow member of CONIFA, that's the Confederation of Independent Football Associations. That's the governing body that exists precisely for national and cultural teams that sit outside the FIFA membership. And it includes teams from Tibet to Padania to, obviously now, Khalistan. It is, ultimately, this match, it's a friendly exhibition match. It's, in reality, it's nothing more than that on paper, but it is important. It is a big match because it does mark that formal beginning of a project that will now allow British Sikh footballers and potentially other from overseas. I don't think there's any actual barrier to anybody joining the team, but ultimately Khalistani footballers to represent an international side at a level that's never actually existed for this community before. And it's remarkable when you look at the fact that Sikhs make up no more than 2% of the population of any country outside of India, and yet they've got their international football team. It's fantastic. And there's another obvious irony actually worth talking about, and I don't think it undermines a story to say it. CONIFA fixtures like this exist precisely because organisations like the Khalistan Football Association are not recognised by the states that claim their territory, in the same way that the political movement itself isn't recognised by India. But actually that's the point, and why it's really worth talking about this, because a sanctioned football match under an internationally recognised confederation with a proper fixture list. Don't forget there's another match in France next month as well. It's a small but tangible, entirely peaceful and democratic way of a stateless nation's identity showing up officially, publicly, on a scoreboard, rather than actually a protest placard or, on a flag in a protest wherever. But importantly for now, deliberately timed, and I've no doubt it's deliberate, for the same date that India will be marking its own independence. So it's wonderful. It's, as I say, if you haven't bought your tickets, please buy your tickets. If you can get there, please do get there. Tickets are on sale. As I say, it's the match is at on the 15th of August. This opening ceremony is at 6:30, kickoff at 7. But I'm sure there'll be all sorts of fun and games and all sorts of wonderful things happening before the match and probably after the match as well. So do get there, take your families. I'm sure it's going to be a great evening out if you can get to the Midlands here in the UK. So anyway, so that is it. That's the news. I'm going to go on to the comments now. Let me just have a quick dive into the live. What have you guys been talking about? Long live the Warriors. Absolutely, Bajwal. Thank you for that. Khalistan Football Association, indeed, absolutely. Lots of football shirts going. Oh, don't forget, down in the links, you will see a link to the merchandise, which is the strip. If you feel so inclined, do buy yourself a football shirt, at least. You can actually buy the full strip, I think, socks, shorts, and the jersey as well. So, yeah, get it. And particularly, especially if you're going to the match, put your jersey on. It'll be absolutely fantastic. So, right. Okay, as I say, let's move on to our comments column. And thank you to you guys, as always, for all your comments. SSI Singh starts us off today. He will either be on the run or killed, just like the one that's disappeared or killed or hidden by the Indian world. I think, if I remember correctly, I think this was one of the police officers who was basically found guilty of past injustices, of which there are many, and it's rare that actually anybody is actually caught and imprisoned. But there's been a sequence, as you rightly say, of Indian police officers who finally, decades later, have been charged and finally sentenced for their outrageous crimes during the Sikh genocides and the 80s and 90s and such. But of course, many of them got released early. And as soon as they're released, they vanished magically. So it's once again, it's Indian justice at its peak. Kuldip Kaur. Hi, Kuldip. Thank you for joining us. We talked about the story of the tragic story of Kirandeep Kaur, this poor young mother, Sikh mother here in the UK, who was murdered in her own home. And she was literally with her young baby. It's just, it brings tears to the eyes. It's a horrible story. But it's the two-tier media coverage that we talked a lot about. And you're absolutely right, Kirandeep. We have talked about this. And it's interesting that the media did report this other killing of Henry Novak. He was a white guy. He was murdered by, I think he was a Sikh. There's some sort of ambiguity about whether this lad actually was a Sikh. Digva was his name. I think he was, but he certainly wasn't an Amritdhari Sikh, I don't believe. But it's how the media have treated both those cases. Yeah, the Sikh killer just was plastered wall to wall right across the global media. But when it comes to Kirandeep Kaur, who was murdered by a white guy, silence, press silence. Again, it's just that two-tier media coverage. I think it's absolutely outrageous. And then, Kuldip, you talk a lot about all sorts of the other stuff. 1984 Sikh genocide, the UK refusing to do an inquiry. Again, despite, you see, the Labour government, our British government who are in power now, they promised in writing, elect us to the government, we will deliver a 1984 inquiry into the British government's involvement in Operation Blue Star. Because it is known, Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister at the time, did liaise with India, apparently even sent in SAS consultants to advise the Indian government on how to attack Bindravani-ji, holed up in the Golden Temple. But we don't know the truth because it's been deliberately buried. But the Labour government promised in opposition, vote for us, and we will immediately launch an inquiry. 2 years later, silence, complete and utter silence. What is it about the British deep state that just bows down on its knee to the Indian deep state? Why? I don't have the answer. I've speculated till I'm blue in the face. Why? I don't know, other than it's just one elite back scratching another elite. That's just how the world works. So anyway, thank you, Kuldip. You say your anger is at the government. I think we're all aligned with that one. It's tragic, isn't it? Stay safe. Hello, stay safe. You're online as well. I've got stay safe comments popping up everywhere I look. Sikhs make history. Waris Punjab Day. Demand release of Amritpal Singh. Indeed. As I say, keep an eye on Waris Punjab Day. Shiromani Akali Dal Waris Punjab Day, to give their full official title. But basically, yeah, it's Amritpal's party, political party. As I say, I predict that party is going to be the real significant player in Indian politics over the next decade. So, as I say, watch that space. Don't hold your breath because it might take a while, but they will get there. I've absolutely no doubt. So, TC, hi TC. I think you were. Oh, you are still online, I think. Yeah. So, hi TC. Nice to see you on both sides again. Down with fascism. Khalistan Zindabad. Very Guruji ka Khalsa. Very Guruji ki Fateh. Indeed, couldn't put it better myself. Padam to our shaheeds. Absolutely, and stay safe. Totally endorses your comment, I do believe. It's the fake Sikhs and the fake accounts. Bane of our lives. Nightmare. Indeed. TC. Absolutely. He's online. You're all there. It's good to see you guys. Nice to see you on live. Murgiv Logs Rinky. There is only one solution. We come to it, I think, every show. We actually reach the same conclusion, and you reached it likewise. There is only one solution. Khalistan Zindabad. Now, the Sikh Jedi. I haven't seen the Sikh Jedi online today, which is a shame, because Sikh Jedi, if you're watching this subsequently, what day is it today? Wednesday. Thursday's show, I have dedicated half the show to you, and you may be wondering why. Watch tomorrow's show, you'll understand why. It's a very big discussion about two very important questions that you've asked this week in the live comments. So please, Sikh Jedi, if you're watching, watch tomorrow's show. You might find it of interest. I hope you do. I found it very interesting putting it all together. And obviously you guys Watch tomorrow's show, because I've got a whole big section planned. It's not directed at Sikh Jedi. He actually raised two very important philosophical points that is very uncomfortable points. This is why actually I've raised it I've done a whole section about it, because it is a level of important, what's called introspection. It's basically looking at ourselves, looking at the Khalistan movement and asking it some very, very uncomfortable questions. Because the Sikh Jedi is not pro-Khalistan. It is our goal in life, of course, to try and persuade the Sikh Jedi to join our cause, to persuade him why it is the right cause to join. But of course, it is his prerogative not to join. But ultimately, the show tomorrow, half of it is dedicated to actually explaining and trying to answer some very uncomfortable questions. Do I do it successfully or do I not? You'll have to watch tomorrow's show. Anyway, so stay safe. Ignore detractor, carry on with mission. Free liberate Punjab. That is really what we're here for. So, at Murgi Vlogs, Rinky, Punjab is not safe without Khalistan. Again, and this actually is the serious point of all this, is that, it's all very well campaigning for Khalistan. There's every reason. We could list 100 different reasons. But of course, some of those reasons are deeply important and deeply serious and sadly deeply tragic, because too many Sikhs have died. And not just Sikhs, Hindus have died in the past. In those awful years of the 80s and 90s, there were so many deaths on all sides, but the Sikhs suffered more than anybody. And the only solution to that is basically separation. Because clearly, since 1947, it has not worked. And it is still not working. And it is not getting any better. So the only way it is ever going to change and people are going to stop dying is to create that division, is to separate Khalistan from India. And then people can choose which regime they would rather live under. That's what democracy is all about. Sidhu, Sat Sri Akal. And the same to all you guys, actually, a general Sat Sri Akal. The Punjab Times. Thanks, Angus, for excellent reporting. I am but a servant. I do what I can. I do my best. Thank you for your comment. It is much appreciated. And Gamoan Grail is here every single day, and it's always nice to see the Sat Sri Akals. So thank you, as always, for being there, Gamoan Grail. Appreciate your loyalty and dropping in. And Jagtar Singh with a whole row of love, which indeed I always love to completely send it back to you guys. We're a huge circle of love and appreciation amongst us all. It is familial love. Thank you for everybody. And here is the Sikh Jedi himself. Thank you, Angus, for not giving up on the Kirandeep Kaur story. Yes, this actually is a serious point. Totally. And I won't, because that tragic murder, this young lady, and it doesn't even matter that she was a Sikh. It was a young girl was murdered in her own home. It is just outrageous that these things still keep happening. Not least the whole political storm behind it, the two-tier media coverage, etc., etc. So, now this was interesting. This was I took a load of some of the questions and comments that came up in the live show from earlier this week. So I just picked a few out from the live feed because I thought these were worth talking about. What have we got? We've got 2.5 minutes. Sikh Jedi, again, features. Sikh Jedi has been very active, actually. I'd say I don't think he's online looking at the comments today. But the Sikh Jedi was very active, certainly over the last couple of days. It's interesting, talking about the Kirandeep Kaur story and this two-tier media coverage, as you rightly call it. It's two-tier media. We've got the Henry Novak killing here in the UK, which I've talked about, was plastered globally. It had a global audience. People, even the Akal Takt, had to issue statements about the Henry Novak killing, a white guy killed by a Sikh. But what about Kirandeep Kaur, a young, vulnerable, tragic Sikh mother with her babe in arms, murdered by a white guy? Silence. Why? It's wrong. As you rightly say, Sikh Jedi, there was more Muslim and black content creators talking about the story than Sikh content creators, interestingly. I don't know if that's strictly true. Maybe it's because you look more at Muslim and black content. I don't know. But what I can definitely say is that the white media, the white mainstream media, certainly is two-tier, absolutely without question. But it's an interesting distinction that you think Sikh content creators didn't cover it enough. I don't know why. That's an interesting interpretation. Hobo, and I know Hobo was online earlier. I don't know if Hobo still is online. I wish we could get the British royal family extradited. Well, this is an interesting comment, and there's almost a whole debate around this. I suppose the big question is why? Why would you want to extradite, presumably to India, or actually arguably anywhere that is formerly British Empire? And it comes back to almost a fundamental argument that I always talk about the British Empire and the sins of the British Empire. Those of us who are alive today are not responsible for the sins of our fathers. You can't imprison the son for the father's murder, or sorry, if his father is a murderer. In other words, we are not responsible for the sins of our fathers. And I'm not responsible for the British Empire. I can look at it objectively. Obviously, from a British perspective, I've benefited from it, obviously, as a British citizen. But ultimately, I wasn't there. I'm not responsible. So I can't be blamed. I carry no guilt over the British Empire. But in the same breath, I do say, as I often do, is that actually my moral obligation as a British citizen now is to actually do what I can to try and repay, or at least act on behalf of those that the British Empire reduced or hurt or victimized, whatever you want to call it, which is why I campaign so passionately for Khalistan, because in my belief, it is my responsibility as a British citizen now to, in recompense for what my forefathers did, is to battle and to argue for Khalistan as repayment to the Sikh Empire that we annexed back in 1849. So, but when it comes to the British family, that's a slightly grey area. King Charles, is it King Charles III, is not the man who was responsible for the British Empire. His forefathers were Queen Victoria, foremothers, what do you want to call it? But yeah, Queen Victoria, if you could extradite Queen Victoria, that's a different issue. Obviously, you can't. So it's this whole sort of rabbit hole. We don't have time to go down it, but there's this whole rabbit hole that seems to be like the real, it's the real current hot potato, as we call it, is that we love to punish ourselves now in the West. This sort of introspection, again, to use that word, is where we love to punish ourselves for the sins of our fathers when none of us were alive. And those descendants of slaves, for example, who say, right, the British owe us £2 trillion. Well, why should you benefit from that? And why should I pay? I wasn't the slave owner and you weren't the slave. It's a whole argument that you can talk for hours about, and I'm not going to, because frankly I'm bored of that subject now. But ultimately, you know the point I'm making. So, Hobo, in answer to your question, it doesn't make sense if you really dig down into the logic of what you're asking. I get why you're saying it. I just think it's just not worth even thinking academically about. And Sikh Jedi's back again. Yeah, and this is right. Divide and rule in effect. I think Sikhs divide themselves. This was an important point, because actually there is division in the Sikh community. Of course there is. Like I often say, every community is made up of human beings, and human beings differ. We all have our own political views. The Sikh community has socialists, it has right-wingers. I see it regularly on social media in Sikh groups, where there's those who are anti-Muslim and those who protect the Muslims. Here in the UK, a huge argument raging, obviously, about immigration and the Islamification of parts of the UK. And many in the Sikh community are up in arms about it. Metaphorically speaking, they're outraged that this can be allowed. But then on the other hand, you've got another section of the Sikh community who say, no, we must give them sanctuary, etc. In other words, of course, the Sikh community is divided. But it is divided like every other community, because we are human beings. We all have our different opinions. But what must unite us, hopefully, is a common goal. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion is. It doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are, other than at least you must be all united in a feeling that you must have sovereignty. You must be the masters or mistresses of your own destiny. You must, in your own community, have the right to make your own decisions and to govern yourselves. That is what Khalistan is about. So I do hope, despite all the divisions, that the community is increasingly united around that one single goal, Khalistan. TC, you did reply to that, say, I agree. They do misguidedly and selfishly, for the most part, the transnational repression attack non-Sikhs, would the media be all over it? And actually this point is, if transnational repression was against people like me, the whites, the media would be full of it. But the fact it's targeting Sikhs. Avatar Singh Kandar in the UK, how much coverage did that get? Almost none. Again, it's two-tier media, as Sikh Jedi pointed to. So absolutely. Oh gosh, we're over time again. Fancy. Final comment is, I think, is that Vahe Guruji? It was in Punjabi, and unfortunately my system now doesn't bring across the Punjabi. Anyway, you know who you are. But what really matters is your comment, and that is the cross Kirpans and the Sats for a cow, which is always a lovely way to finish. Indeed. Thank you, you guys, as always. Do keep the comments coming. What day is today? Wednesday. So Thursday, yeah, do watch tomorrow's show. It's not live. It is pre-recorded, but it'll be uploaded tomorrow morning UK time. So do keep an eye out for that. Please, obviously, let me know your comments. Fill up the comments below because it gives me lots to talk about. And I do love to know what you guys think about, how you feel about the subjects that I talk about, and any contributions that you have. So let me know any thoughts that you might have. Much appreciated. Don't forget, you can email me directly, message@satellodgetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to my attention directly, as many indeed of you have done. So thank you for that. But that's it for another day, another show. And thank you, guys. Nice to see you guys still chatting away online. Who's there? Oh, we've got WHO Panzers still there. That's nice to see you again. TCs, stay safe. You're all there. Great to see you guys. Have a great night. Stay safe. That's not stay safe the person. That is stay safe. That is an instruction. Stay safe tonight. Sleep well. Have a great night. And God willing, I will see you guys tomorrow. Not live, pre-recorded, but be good to see you guys again anyway. And so don't forget my podcast on Friday, which will be uploaded. That's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.